The first sign of their arrival was a gravitational disturbance on the edge of the solar system. At first, Earth's orbital observatories thought it was a rogue planet or a collapsing star, but the truth was far worse: a fleet of warships, larger than anything humanity had ever conceived, emerged from the void beyond Neptune. Each vessel was a leviathan of destruction, miles-long constructs of black metal, bristling with weaponry that defied human understanding. Their hulls pulsed with an eerie crimson glow, the unmistakable signature of a species that had mastered war in ways no other civilization had. The Imperium Rex had arrived. For centuries, the Imperium Rex had been whispered about among the elder civilizations of the galaxy. They were an empire of conquerors, a species of towering four-armed warlords whose very existence revolved around combat. Their philosophy was simple: war was the ultimate truth. Weak civilizations existed only to be dominated or destroyed, and now they had set their sights on Earth. First contact. The first transmission came within hours of their arrival. Every communication channel on Earth was overridden. Television broadcasts flickered to static before revealing a monstrous figure, a towering creature clad in dark, segmented armor, its golden eyes glowing like twin suns. Humans. The voice was deep, reverberating as if a mountain had spoken. You stand before the Imperium Rex. We have conquered 1,000 worlds, broken empires that have stood for millennia. You are but insects compared to us, but we are not without honor. The figure leaned forward, mandibles clicking. We offer you a challenge. Prove yourselves in war, or be swept aside like the countless weaklings before you. This is the way of the universe. This is the law of the strong. The transmission ended. Panic erupted. Earth responds. Within minutes, the United Earth Defense Council was convened. Representatives from every major government, military leaders, scientists, and historians gathered in an underground bunker deep beneath Geneva. The room was filled with tension. On one side, military generals demanded immediate mobilization. Earth's defenses, while formidable, had never been tested against an extraterrestrial invasion of this scale. There was talk of launching preemptive strikes, of deploying nuclear warheads into orbit, of rallying the scattered human colonies beyond Mars. On the other side, the politicians and scientists urged caution. Humanity was still young in the grand scale of the universe. They had only recently become an interstellar species. If the Imperium Rex was as powerful as the legend suggested, direct conflict would be suicide. Then an unexpected voice spoke up. Dr. Marcus Ellison, a historian specializing in military conflicts, stood from his seat. He was not a soldier, not a politician, but his voice carried weight. They believe war is the highest form of honor, he said. They see themselves as the strongest species in the universe, but they know nothing of us. They assume we are weak, that we have never fought wars worthy of their respect. General Kovalenko, the head of Earth's military forces, folded her arms. And what do you suggest, Professor? That we negotiate with them? Ellison shook his head. No, we show them what real war is, the nature of humanity. The room fell silent. Humanity had never been the strongest species, never the fastest, never the most resilient, but they had one advantage. They were survivors of their own brutality. While other species had waged wars over resources or territory, humanity's wars had been apocalyptic. They had fought with desperation, with ingenuity, with cruelty beyond imagination, and yet they had endured. The Imperium Rex fights wars to prove their strength, Ellison continued. We fight wars to end them, and that is what terrifies every other species in the galaxy. That is why the Galactic Council warned them not to come here. We do not fight with honor, we fight to win at any cost. The room absorbed his words. Then slowly a plan formed. Instead of answering the Imperium Rex with weapons, they would answer with history. A message was prepared, a transmission encoded with something more terrifying than any weapon. A history. Lesson. The Imperium Rex prepares for war while Earth formulated its response. The Imperium Rex prepared for battle. On board the flagship Dread Crucible, Warlord Vectorak the Unyielding stood before his elite commanders. The chamber was a cathedral of war, lined with banners woven from the flesh of conquered foes. The air hummed with the low growl of warriors eager for blood. "The humans have not answered our challenge," one of his lieutenants growled. "Shall we burn their world and be done with it?" Vectorak considered this. Unlike his impatient subordinates, he was no fool. He had fought countless species, from the hive minds of the Dralka to the cybernetic legions of the Vothari. But something about humanity unsettled him. The Galactic Council, normally indifferent to conquest, had warned against this war. The elder races spoke of humans with fear, not contempt. Why? They were small, fragile things. They lacked the biological enhancements of the Imperium. They lacked the ancient technologies of the Starborn ascendancy. And yet, they had survived, even thrived in a galaxy filled with predators. That meant something. And then, the response came. A single transmission, broadcasted directly to every Imperium warship. Vectorak narrowed his eyes and played the message. Tamiti. Screen flickered, and then war began. Not the kind he had expected. Not with ships. Not with weapons, but with something far worse. Humanity's past. The Imperium Rex had given humanity a choice. Fight and prove their worth, or be annihilated. The expected response was a show of force. Earth's meager fleet scrambling to meet the Imperium's armada. Soldiers standing in defiance before the greatest warriors in the galaxy. A futile resistance. A noble but meaningless struggle. But what the Imperium received was something else entirely. The meeting in Geneva, deep beneath the Earth, in the fortified command center of the United Earth Defense Council, the most powerful. Figures of humanity sat in silence as the transmission ended. For a long moment no one spoke. Then General Kovalenko exhaled through her nose, the sound harsh in the tension-filled room. They expect a war, a battle, a last stand. That's what they want. President Okafor of the African Union leaned forward, clasping her hands. "And if we don't fight?" "Then they wipe us out for being weak," came the grim response. From Admiral Hayashi of the United Earth Naval Command. Around the table, murmurs of agreement and disagreement flared. Some called for immediate action, for a demonstration of Earth's might. Others cautioned against reckless engagement. Humanity had never faced an enemy of this scale before. Dr. Marcus Ellison listened in silence. He had seen war, but not as a soldier. He had studied its patterns, its consequences, and in all his years as a historian he had learned one undeniable truth. Wars were never about who was the strongest. They were about who could endure the most suffering. He stood, his voice calm but firm. "They think we don't know war, that we're untested, weak, that we don't understand what it means to fight. That's their mistake." All eyes turned to him. "We do not answer their challenge with weapons," he continued. "We answer with history." General Kovalenko's expression was skeptical. "You want to fight a warlord species with a lecture?" Ellison didn't flinch. "Not a lecture, a demonstration." His gaze swept the room. "They fight for glory. We fight to survive. We don't wage wars for honor. We wage wars that leave scars on the soul of a species. If they think war is something to be celebrated, let's show them what war really is." Silence. Then a slow nod from President Okafor. "How do we begin?" Ellison turned to the room's engineers, cyber specialists, and intelligence officers. "We feed them everything. A war unlike any other." The Imperium Rex waited for Earth's answer, expecting a fleet, a weapon, an army. What they received instead was a signal, not a challenge, not a plea, a simple message, broadcasted across every Imperium warship, overriding for their systems, forcing itself into their neural interfaces, their shipboard AIs, their very thoughts. It was human history. It started slow. Images of primitive humans warring with sticks and stones, clans clashing over resources. Then the rise of civilization, swords and spears, empires battling for dominance, Rome, Carthage, the endless cycle of conquest and bloodshed, the Imperium. Commanders scoffed. These were child's games, minor conflicts compared to the galactic wars they had fought. But then the images changed. They saw fields of bodies rotting under darkened skies, trenches filled with men choking on poison gas, artillery fire turning landscapes into craters of blood and mud. World War I. The Imperium warlords shifted uncomfortably. They had fought battles before, but nothing like this, where men wasted away in filth, where soldiers died not by the sword, but by sickness, by starvation, by sheer hopelessness. And then, the horror escalated. Cities burning in the night. The sea, screams of the innocent. Armies of millions locked in battles where not even surrender meant survival. Machine guns tearing through ranks of flesh. World War II. They saw the Holocaust, the cold, calculated extermination of millions. The firebombing of Dresden, Tokyo, entire cities wiped out in moments, and then the final blow, a mushroom cloud rising over Hiroshima. The sheer magnitude of destruction stunned even the most hardened of the Imperium warlords. One bomb, and an entire city was gone. But the lesson wasn't over. They saw Korea, Vietnam, the Cold War brinkmanship, where nuclear fire could have ended the world 100 times over. And then came the modern wars, conflicts where there was no front line, only an unending cycle of insurgency, terrorism, and asymmetrical warfare. Stealth bombers that could level a city before the enemy even knew they were under attack. Cyber warfare that could cripple nations without a single shot fired. Biological weapons that could kill more efficiently than any army. And the worst part? The Imperium realized that this was not ancient history. Humans had not outgrown war. They had perfected it. They did not fight for conquest, for glory. They fought to break the enemy completely, to ensure that wars ended as fast and as brutally as possible. The Imperium Rex, who had prided themselves as the greatest warriors in the galaxy, had never fought a species like this, because no other species had ever been so willing to turn war into something so horrific. The silence of the Imperium on the bridge of the dread crucible, Warlord Vectorak stood frozen, watching the endless horror unfold before his eyes. He had seen civilizations fall. He had witnessed planets burn. He had personally led campaigns of genocide across the stars, but never had he seen war like this. This was not the ritualized combat of the Imperium, where warriors clashed in honorable battle. This was total war, a kind of war that did not end, until there was nothing left. The neural links of his warriors were filled with screams, some of them not even human. Imperium soldiers were breaking down, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of suffering they had witnessed. A low murmur spread through his command deck. Doubt, fear. The Imperium did not fear war, but they feared this. Vectorak clenched his massive fists, his golden eyes narrowed as the final images played. The wars yet to come. Humans had not only fought wars, they had imagined even greater ones. Doomsday scenarios, end-of-the-world conflicts, weapons capable of wiping out entire civilizations with the push of a button. They did not just survive war. They planned for wars that would make the Imperium's conquest look like skirmishes. Vectorak took a deep breath. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a whisper. Cut the transmission. The screen went black for the first time in his life. He did not know what to do. The Imperium had come to test humanity's strength. They had found an answer, and it terrified them. The transmission had ended, but the silence in the Imperium fleet was deafening. Thousands of warships, each capable of razing planets, floated motionless in the void beyond Pluto. Inside, the greatest warriors of the most feared species in the universe stood in stunned paralysis. They had asked humanity to prove their worth in war. Humanity had responded with a lesson in total annihilation. The breaking of the Imperium on board Vachi. Dread crucible. Warlord Vectorak the Unyielding clenched his four fists so tightly that the thick chitin of his exoskeleton cracked. He could still hear the echoes of the transmission in his mind. The screaming, the fire, the endless cycle of slaughter that humans had perfected over millennia. His warriors, his strongest commanders, all stood frozen in the command chamber. Some trembled, their bodies instinctively recoiling from what they had witnessed. Vectorak turned to his second-in-command, Hakarthun, a veteran of 100 planetary campaigns. Hakarthun had never known fear. He had charged into the maws of bio-titans, torn apart armored juggernauts with his bare hands. But now his golden eyes were wide. His mandibles twitched. His breathing was unsteady. "Warlord," Hakarthun said, his voice hoarse. "This is madness. This is not war. This is destruction beyond reason." Vectorak said nothing. He turned to the bridge's central display, where the last images of the transmission still lingered. The final lesson humanity had sent them. It had not been history. It had been speculation. They had been shown potential future wars, conflicts so devastating that even the Imperium, a species that had conquered thousands of worlds, recoiled in horror. Doomsday weapons that could burn entire atmospheres away in a single detonation. Artificial intelligences that could wage war without a single biological soldier. Biological weapons that could erase entire species without leaving a trace. Humanity had not just fought wars. They had planned for the end of everything. The unraveling of an empire. Across the Imperium fleet, the psychological effects of the transmission were immediate and catastrophic. Among the warrior caste, there was silence. Some fell to their knees, their bodies unable to process what they had seen. The youngest among them, those who had never known defeat, broke down in confusion and fear. The elder warriors, those who had waged 1,000 battles, stood in grim contemplation. They had believed themselves invincible. Now, for the first time in the Imperium's history, they questioned, what if we are not the strongest? The ripple of doubt spread like a virus. Among the lower-ranked officers, murmurs of concern became whispers of fear. Some debated desertion. Others considered whether the Imperium's way, their very philosophy, was flawed. But the most terrifying reaction came from the war priests. The Imperium Rex did not just wage war, they worshipped it. Their priests preached that battle was the highest form of existence, that to die in combat was the only path to honor. And yet, after witnessing the truth of human warfare, some of them fell into utter despair. "This is not war," whispered one priest, staring blankly at the void. "This is oblivion." Another, his mind shattered by the images of nuclear fire consuming entire cities, collapsed onto the floor. "We have made a mistake," he muttered over and over again. "We have made a mistake." The Council of Warlords hours later, in the war chamber of the Dread Crucible, the highest-ranking warlords of the Imperium Rex gathered. Vectorak stood at the head of the table, his golden eyes scanning the room. These were the most powerful, warriors of their kind, the conquerors of the Andromeda frontier, the destroyers of the Malvic Empire, the unchallenged rulers of war. And yet, tonight, they were shaken. "This changes nothing," barked Warlord Kraxthor, pounding a massive fist onto the table. His voice carried an edge of desperation. "Humanity cannot stand against us in open battle. Their fleets are weak. Their armies are scattered. We should burn their world before they have a chance to strike first." A murmur of agreement passed through some of the warlords. Vectorak remained silent, observing. Then Warlord Sharnkath, one of the oldest and most respected among them, exhaled, slowly. "You do not understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You do not see what has already happened," Kraxthor growled. "Enlighten me, Old One." Sharnkath turned her piercing gaze toward him. "They have already won." The room fell. "Silent, you speak madness," Kraxthor spat. Sharnkath shook her head. "We have seen the truth. We, the Imperium Rex, believed ourselves the greatest warriors in the universe. That war was our domain. That battle was our birthright." Her mandibles tightened. "And yet, humanity has shown us war beyond anything we could have imagined. Not battles of honor, not glorious combat, but war as an instrument of total annihilation. We do not fear the humans' weapons. We fear their minds. Their willingness to destroy, not for conquest, not for pride, but simply to end a war as quickly as possible." Some of the warlords lowered their heads, realizing the weight of her words. Kraxthor, defiant, bared his fangs. "You cower before. Weaklings. If they are so strong, let them fight us in the field," Vectorak finally spoke. "You fool," he said, his voice quiet, deadly. Kraxthor turned to him, rage burning in his eyes. "What did you say?" Vectorak stepped forward. "They do not fight like us. If they did, we would have already conquered them." He let the weight of his words settle. "No," cracks Thor. "If we fight them, they will not meet us in glorious battle. They will erase us. They will not send armies. They will send weapons that we cannot defend against, diseases that we cannot cure, fire that will consume our homeworld before we even understand we are under attack." His eyes locked onto each warlord in the chamber. "That is why the Galactic Council warned us. That is why the elder races fear them." He exhaled, his voice filled with a rare emotion. "Regret. We have made a mistake." The decision. The warlords left the chamber in silence. The Imperium Rex had waged war for centuries without question, but now a seed of doubt had been planted in their hearts. As the fleet drifted in space, Vectorak made the final decision. The Imperium Rex would not fight humanity. They would retreat, not because they lacked strength, but because they had glimpsed the abyss of human warfare, and they knew in their hearts that they did not want to face it. The Imperium Rex did something it had never done before. It turned away. The fleet that had darkened the skies of countless worlds, that had reduced civilizations to ashes, that had never known surrender, retreated from Earth's doorstep without firing a single shot. For the first time in their long and bloody history, the Imperium had been defeated without battle. Not by weapons, not by tactics, but by fear. The war that should have been the greatest in human history never happened. A decision that changed the galaxy back on Earth. Inside the fortified war room of the United Earth Defense Council, silence reigned. As humanity watched the impossible unfold, the Imperium's warships, once poised to strike, began turning away from the solar system. The massive battle formations that had signaled inevitable destruction were now dissolving, their engines flaring as they disappeared into the void. Admiral Hayashi was the first to break the silence. He let out a slow breath. "They're leaving." "General." Kovalenko frowned, as if unable to believe what she was seeing. "Just like that?" President Okafor leaned forward. "Get me a confirmation." Technicians scrambled, scanning every frequency, every movement. Within minutes, the answer came. "All Imperium vessels are retreating past the Kuiper Belt." The war was over before it had even begun. Dr. Marcus Ellison exhaled, his fingers steepled before him. His gambit had worked. Humanity had not fought back with ships or weapons. They had fought back with the truth of what war meant when waged by their kind, and the Imperium had seen enough to know they wanted no part of it. But as relief swept through the room, a darker realization settled in. The Imperium Rex was not the only power in the galaxy. If one of the most feared empires could be broken by the knowledge of human warfare, what would the rest of the galaxy do? What had humanity just revealed about itself? Echoes across the stars. The Imperium's retreat sent shockwaves across the known universe. For centuries, the Imperium Rex had been undefeated. Their very name was synonymous with war. They had crushed every species they encountered, shattered entire civilizations without pause. And yet, when faced with humanity, they had fled. The Galactic Council, the vast and ancient body that governed interstellar relations, convened in emergency session. Every major empire, from the scholarly Zelthari to the coldly logical Valtari consensus, demanded answers. What did humanity do? What weapon did they unleash? What power do they hold that even the Imperium fears them? The truth spread quickly. The humans had revealed their history, their endless, brutal wars, their terrifying ingenuity and destruction. And as the galaxy learned what had happened, two reactions emerged. The first was fear. Many species recoiled in horror. They had always assumed humanity was a young, reckless race, ambitious but insignificant. But now they saw the truth. Humanity was something else entirely, a species that had never known galactic war, but had still managed to outmatch the Imperium's understanding of combat. A species that, if provoked, would not just fight but annihilate. Diplomatic channels flooded with cautious messages, carefully worded requests for peace, alliances, anything to stay on humanity's good side. The second reaction was far more dangerous. There were those who saw not a threat but an opportunity. If humans were capable of such war, then they could be used, directed, manipulated, and if they refused, then they would have to be eliminated before they could become unstoppable. Humanity had won the war against the Imperium Rex, but in doing so, they had drawn the attention of something far worse, the warning in the cold depths of space aboard the Dread Crucible. Warlord Vectorax stood alone, watching the blue glow of Earth on the bridge's main display. The transmission had changed everything. He had spent his entire life believing war was the ultimate measure of strength, that a warrior's glory was eternal. But humans had shown him another truth. War was not honor, war was not glory, war was hell, and no species in the universe understood that better than them. A soft chime broke the silence as his communications officer approached. The High War. Council demands an explanation, Warlord. Vectorax did not turn. They will have it soon enough, the officer hesitated. Some of the other warlords disagree with your decision. They believe we should fight. Vectorax finally turned, his golden eyes burning. Then they are fools. A long pause. Then, softer, the officer asked, What do we do now? Vectorax looked back at the planet. He knew the Imperium was fractured. Some would accept his decision. Others would seek battle, believing it better to die than to retreat. And beyond them, the rest of the galaxy was watching, waiting, plotting. Humanity had just painted a target on itself. He sighed. We pray they never go to war again. And for the first time in his life, Warlord Vectorax, the unyielding, the butcher of Andromeda, the conqueror of 1,000 worlds, meant it. Earth's next move back on Earth, the United Earth Defense Council, knew what had to be done. The Imperium's retreat was a victory, but it had also exposed them. They had revealed too much, and now the entire galaxy knew what humanity was capable of. New threats would emerge. New enemies would come, not out of arrogance like the Imperium, but out of fear. Humanity had been given a brief moment of peace. It was time to prepare for what came next. The future of war humanity did not celebrate. There were no parades, no declarations of triumph, because they understood something the Imperium never had. A war won without a battle is not a war that is truly over. Somewhere, in the cold void of space, new plans were being made. New alliances were being forged. New enemies were sharpening their blades, because now the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity did not just fight wars, they survived them, and that made them the most dangerous species in the universe.